The number of people pouring into Armenia from Nagorno-Karabakh is rising sharply this Tuesday. It has been a week since Azerbaijan took control of the enclave in a lightning-speed military operation. Since then, Armenian authorities say more than 28,000 people have fled. The United States and the UN are calling for their rights and safety to be protected.
They flee in cars, buses, and trucks. Vehicles choke the road leading out of Nagorno-Karabakh into Armenia. The people crammed inside have exhaustion etched on their faces. Many spent the night on the road. They fear they are leaving their ancestral lands for good.
Now we are stray dogs. That is our status. Let the world know that we are stray dogs.
Many ethnic Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh feel they have no choice but to pack up their things and leave. Azerbaijan blockaded them for 9 months before its military swooped in last week. Everything is lacking, including the fuel to leave. This led to disaster when a gas tank exploded at a petrol station while people queued late on Monday, leaving dozens dead and many more injured. The explosion sending flames shooting into the night sky. Some of the blast victims were treated and evacuated by Russian peacekeepers on Tuesday. They have been stationed in Nagorno-Karabakh since Azerbaijan wrested much of the enclave from Armenian separatist forces in 2020. After decades of inter-ethnic tensions, Armenians feel unsafe with the Azerbaijanis fully in charge. As the exodus continues, this father is reunited with his daughter on the Armenian side of the border. A moment of relief at a time of desperation.
Well, today there were emergency talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan held in Brussels. Now, after those talks, DW News asked the Azerbaijani president's foreign policy advisor about claims of ethnic cleansing being carried out by Azerbaijan.
First of all, really such an abbreviations like an ethnic cleansing, we do accept it as an insult and humiliation towards an Azerbaijani people, and there was no such a case in the history of Azerbaijani people. Only thing is that Azerbaijan is providing a secure corridor for the civilians, and who, based on their individual choice and also in a free manner, are deciding to go to the Republic of Armenia currently because of the current circumstances. Again, it's a free choice of the people. Azerbaijan ensuring freedom of their movement. In the meantime, secure and decent communication so that local Armenian residents who decide to go to the Republic of Armenia, it is up to their personal and individual decision.
But they are being forced from their homes, essentially?
No, they haven't been forced, because the Republic of Azerbaijan, and as a result of counter-terrorism actions on the ground, first of all, didn't enter to the civilian settlements and major cities, and it was limited by nature, and so far, Azerbaijan armed forces and police forces mainly are guided by these principles, and we are also in closer contact with the local Armenian representatives on the ground and trying to ameliorate humanitarian situation on the ground. In no way there is an action of the force, and there was also no single registered such an effect on the ground.
The Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has said that an international observer mission could only go into Nagorno-Karabakh with the Azerbaijani side's agreement. What's your position on that? If you're not doing anything to hide, it's okay to have an international observation mission going in, surely?
Azerbaijan has nothing to hide, and Azerbaijan's intention is not to create a restrictive zone over there. And currently we are in contact with our counterparts with an appropriate UN offices in Baku in Azerbaijan. UN office in Baku is accredited for the entire territory of Azerbaijan, and some of their representatives and expert level could also have an access, of course, for the security situation, and security condition must be applied on the ground. But of course, we don't think about any need for any kind of international observer mission and so on, because the realities on the ground isn't obvious. Azerbaijan has nothing to hide. Certain things are very difficult, but in the meantime, quite understandably, because in every such a situation and certain difficulties and challenges are emerging. But in the meantime, Azerbaijan's side has a stronger determination to ensure equal rights of the civilian Armenian residents on the ground. And we also are delighted to see that there was a 2 intensive round of the discussion with their representatives about the inclusive process where we can ensure their rights and security on the ground.
We've seen Washington and Moscow make some quite clear statements against each other and the actions that they're playing. Are you worried that your country is just becoming a pawn, perhaps, on a sort of broader geopolitical issue?
What I would say that Azerbaijan was always against any kind of geopolitical competition in our region, and the region has suffered a lot, and it's also a message to our old European partners as well, and the region shouldn't be seen through the prism of the geopolitical competition, and everybody should exert all of their efforts towards finding the peace in the region. I think that is a crucial and historical moment that Armenia, Azerbaijan can be much closer to the peace treaty between two countries.
So is it safe for ethnic Armenians to remain inside Nagorno-Karabakh? I put that question to history professor Ronald Sunni. He's a specialist in the Caucasus region.
I don't believe it's safe for Armenians to stay in Karabakh or any part of Azerbaijan at the moment. The Azerbaijanis now, since September 19th, have the upper hand. The Russian peacekeepers are doing nothing, and Armenians don't trust the Azerbaijanis, with whom they've had this active conflict for now 30 years. And so, in order to save themselves and what they can, they're desperately trying to leave the country. Azerbaijan's aims are largely to get rid of these Armenians. They've been troublesome for the Azerbaijani regime, and Baku now is savoring its victory, its triumph over Armenians, and this will guarantee Ilham Aliyev's reign as a dictator in Azerbaijan for a generation to come.
What do you make then of Azerbaijan saying that there is no need for international observers to be on the ground because the country has nothing to hide?
The very way you phrase the question, it seems contradictory in and of itself. We have nothing to hide, therefore there's no need for international observers. If you have nothing to hide, let the international observers come in and observe and find out what's going on there. It would be very good if some international observers or foreign powers got more actively involved in what's going on in Karabakh. But Russia, which was obligated by the armistice in the short 44-day war that occurred in the fall of 2020, was supposed to guarantee the safety of the Armenians and keep the two sides apart and allow humanitarian aid, food, medicine to reach the Karabakh Armenians. The Russians failed in all of these ways. And Armenians were, for 6 or 7 months, cut off from Armenia. That is, Karabakh Armenians cut off from Armenia proper, and therefore they were weakened. And then suddenly, without provocation, on September 19th, the Azerbaijanis attacked, and the Armenians, under Russian pressure, were forced to disarm themselves, and now they're basically at the mercy of the Azerbaijani authorities and military.
Professor, do you agree with the Armenians who have said that they have been basically neglected by Moscow because Moscow has been preoccupied with its invasion of Ukraine?
Absolutely. There's a real parallel between these two events. As Putin is so busy with his army stuck in the mud of eastern Ukraine that he has kind of given up on the traditional Russian hegemony and dominance in the South Caucasus. Russians still control 2 areas, Abkhazia and South Ossetia in Georgia, but they've actually given up, and they've betrayed, at least Armenians feel this way, they betrayed their most loyal ally in the former Soviet Union, that is the little Republic of Armenia. There's still a Russian base in Armenia, but Armenians are very discontented with the Russians and disappointed. Apparently, Mr. Putin has personal animosities toward the Armenian democratically elected Prime Minister, Mr. Nikol Pashinyan. So here we have a situation in which an authoritarian state, a sultanist state, a dictatorship has won a quick war over a democratically elected state. And you wonder, where is the United States? Where are the Western powers that are fighting so hard in Ukraine to prevent a democracy from being defeated by an authoritarian state? Yet they're allowing a democratic Armenia to be defeated by an autocratic Azerbaijan, and 120,000 Armenians ethnically cleansed from Karabakh.
Important questions coming tonight from Professor Ronald Suni from the University of Michigan. Professor, we appreciate your time and your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, for more now, I'm joined by Lawrence Brewers. He's an associate fellow at Chatham House. He's also an expert on the Caucasus region. Lawrence, it's good to have you with us. After the events of the past few days, and just considering the vast numbers of ethnic Armenians who are leaving Nagorno-Karabakh, would you say that this is the end of the Armenian population in that region?
Well, it's definitely the end, I think, of any aspirations to self-rule, to sovereignty or independence, which is, of course, what the Karabakh Armenian movement was all about, that began in the late 1980s. Whether there will be a smaller population, a residual population that lives on in Karabakh is unknown. We've seen approximately 30,000 Karabakh Armenians pouring over into Armenia. There are talks ongoing between Karabakh Armenian representatives and Azerbaijani officials on the terms of integration. But I think there is a huge fear that Karabakh Armenians feel, and they are essentially voting with their feet and leaving Azerbaijan.
And we heard it today from the foreign policy advisor to the leader of Azerbaijan following talks in Brussels, emergency talks that were held between Armenia and Azerbaijan, that Azerbaijan has nothing to hide in Nagorno-Karabakh. And yet, at the same time, we heard that there's no reason for international observers to be on the ground there. How do you read that?
Well, I think there's a very ambiguous situation. We don't know what happened in a number of outlying areas during the military assault that took place last week. There have been persistent calls for a humanitarian access and assistance to be offered, both to those Armenians that are now in Armenia, but to those that are still in Azerbaijan. So, I think there's an urgent need for that. We need eyes and ears on the ground. Otherwise, it's basically an information vacuum in a very polarized and very coercive environment, unfortunately.
Do we know, though, Armenia, is it able to cope with, these huge numbers of people coming over the border who are mostly ethnic Armenians?
Well, the Prime Minister of Armenia, Nikol Pashinyan, has said that Armenia is ready to host up to 40,000 families, which would certainly be enough to cover the whole of the population that might come from Karabakh. But I think there's a lot of doubt about how prepared Armenia actually is. And I think there's going to be a need for sustained humanitarian support to Armenia as it resettles these people. What we're hearing from Karabakh Armenians that are crossing over into Armenia is that they do not expect to go back. So we are looking at a long-term integration program, unfortunately.
And what about geopolitics in all of this? The European Union today hosted these talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I mean, does it have a role to play here?
Well, I think in a way we've seen the failure of both Euro-Atlantic diplomacy and Russian geopolitics. Russia was historically the mediator here. It imposed its vision of a ceasefire arrangement in 2020 at the end of the last war, and it has now basically stood aside in the face of an Azerbaijani operation. The European Union, I think, has been left in this position where it has been advocating for a governance solution to the conflict, human rights, and so on, and it has just been left picking up the tab for a humanitarian catastrophe. It's pledged somewhere in the region of 5 million euros for humanitarian support. I think it's very important that talks do continue because there is a great threat of further instability in the region. So we do need a normalization agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Do you agree with what we're hearing from Armenia, that the Armenians feel that they have been neglected by Russia because Russia has been preoccupied with its war in Ukraine?
I think this Russian distraction with the war in Ukraine is part of it. But I think it's also shifting value for Russia of its respective relationships with Armenia and Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan and its ally Turkey have become much more important to Russia as a result of the Ukraine war. Russia is looking at different ways to remain connected, to have a connectivity that can work around sanctions. And both Turkey and Azerbaijan play key roles in that. So I think we're seeing a Russia that it's kind of stepped down. It's been demoted from regional hegemon to a partner in an Azerbaijan-Turkey axis to realign the South Caucasus. So, in that sense, I think this has been a failure for Russia as well as for the West.
Yeah, when you say the West, I'm wondering what role the United States has to play here. Armenia does have a democratically elected leader, and that is the country that appears to be not getting the support that it had expected from Russia. Should the U.S. be coming in and supporting it the way it's supporting Ukraine?
Well, I think there's a huge difference with the Ukraine conflict in the sense that Russia invaded Ukraine, and I think there's a clear sort of geopolitical script. Western audiences understand who the bad guy is. I think that is more complicated in the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict. Each side has been on the receiving end of terrible atrocities and suffering at different cycles in the conflict. And the United States, I think, very much wants the European Union to take the lead. With that said, I think the Karabakh Armenians do feel very much abandoned by the international community. Various assurances that there wouldn't be violence and that, a campaign for rights and security would pay off have been proven completely false. So there is a huge sense of disillusionment and disappointment. And that's going to affect Armenia's politics in the long term.
Lawrence Brewers, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us tonight. We appreciate your analysis as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.